Hello, and thank you so much for joining us as we take some time out to discuss the state of your mental health and how being finance fit impacts it. This month, Standard Bank is focusing on financial fitness and its mental health benefits. So to wade through this topic with me are Dr. Zamo Mbele, a Joburg-born clinical psychologist practicing in South Africa's public, private and corporate governance space. Also in on the conversation is senior clinical psychologist Dr. Sheethal Behari, originally from Durban, currently in private practice in Lone Hill. She has extensive experience in depression and anxiety, which we know can really flare up when financial challenges enter the room. Doctors, challenges. What a euphemism, eh?
Absolutely, and I think that hopefully what we'll be able to highlight in the conversation today is that it can actually be a real struggle, and unfortunately in certain times, in fact, cost lives, as well as cost people a lot of money in the process.
This euphemism of challenges, it goes far beyond just that word.
Yes, it can encompass your whole life, because when you're feeling depressed and anxiety, it goes to, depression and anxiety, it extends to all spheres of your life. So it debilitates you. So it becomes more than just a challenge. Everything in your life just becomes too heavy.
With COVID-19 in mind, we know that we've learned how recovery goes beyond the physical, and getting into the swing of exercise has been difficult for so many people. The same sentiment then has to apply to money. Where do we even start on its mental health impact?
I think that we can have an extensive conversation about it, though perhaps it's important to consider it on the other way around. Oftentimes what I might say to people is that the cost actually of seeking help is very little if you compare it and you consider the cost of suffering and struggling from a mental health difficulty or from a psychological difficulty. And what we know is that at times it really can cost lives, and oftentimes it can cost livelihoods. So we know that individuals oftentimes are not performing at their peak. They're not, in fact, achieving their goals, and therefore, and oftentimes, they're not able, in fact, to make the financial decisions that they would like. They're also not able to reach the goals that they might set for themselves and their families. I also occasionally speak to organizations about the cost of not investing in human resources or wellness spaces, all the way through from absenteeism, which is individuals not making it to work and really costing companies and organizations, or presenteeism, where people are sitting at their desks, though they're just not being productive, and the cost to company in that regard. So the costs are all round, actually.
Dr. Behari?
I completely agree. And I think on a personal level, if you're suffering with anxiety and depression, you tend to either bury your head in the sand because you don't not want to engage in your finances, or you tend to engage in reckless spending because it's a reward system and it makes you feel better at the time. But the spiraling effect of that is that you put yourself in more and more debt, and you become more and more depressed about it. Also, the associated behaviors in trying to make yourself feel better when you're anxious or depressed is an increase in substance use or gambling, and those behaviors can also have an impact on your financial health. So mental health directly is affected by and affects financial health and well-being.
But people are saying they just need something to help them feel better.
Well, the something to help them feel better in the moment can be the gambling or the substances, and really it might help in the moment, though it actually absolutely won't be sustainable, and it won't help their life actually and their livelihoods and oftentimes their families. That something is oftentimes actually professional help. That's going to see somebody, that's going to seek professional support from a counselor, from a psychologist, from a psychiatrist, and the long-term cost benefit of being able to recognize the something that's sustainable is much, much better than the more immediate kind of quick fix.
Yeah, but also I think it's maybe change the way you think. So, for example, maybe a reward system before, when your finances were great, was taking a holiday away or buying yourself an expensive pair of shoes. And maybe that reward system needs to change. So it's very hard to tell someone to not spend at all because of the way they're feeling and because we are human beings. So maybe the reward system needs to change so you can buy yourself a cheaper thing, a chocolate or a behavior that makes you feel better but doesn't spend all your cash.
You know, I can actually also absolutely say that you will enjoy the chocolate and the holiday a lot more when you are actually doing better,
Yes,
as opposed to
100%.
just trying to get it to feel better.
Yes, 100%.
So behaviorally then, what would depression look like in terms of finances? How would you typically identify money habits that signify a depressed individual?
I think it echoes so much of what we've just said, but it is reckless spending, burying your head in the sand, not wanting to deal with your finances, borrowing money because just to make it through the end of the month, and just thinking that I'm sure it will get better next month. So this, your thought patterns are affected by depression. So just magically thinking that I'm sure it will get better. Or also, on the other hand, thinking it'll never get better. So what is the point anymore? But I think all of those things, people can go different ways based on how they feel at the time in terms of their spending.
I'm just thinking also about perhaps some young professionals and actually some high-functioning professionals as well, and where they may be doing very well and have a history of making very good financial decisions. Though I think you and I know that depression really impacts one's ability to concentrate or to plan.
Yes, and your decision-making process.
Your decision-making process, really it does. And then all of a sudden we start to see people making decisions which are atypical and unlike them and getting themselves into a very, very difficult place. Not because the funds are not there, though they're just not being utilized properly, because you're forgetting to pay this, forgetting to pay that, paying too much, paying too little, and so on and so forth. So it can really be insidious until it has a real impact on your life and your monies as well.
It sounds really debilitating. Just getting up, dressing up, and trying to show up can also just take it out of you. What then of a sufferer's physical health? That is equally important. Without climbing a mountain of information, what are some activities or starting points that could possibly lead to improved well-being?
We now absolutely know that again and again it's been proven that there's a huge link between mental health and physical health, and we really appreciate that. And I suppose there are two ways to think about it, and I will maybe touch on when things have gone wrong or when your mental health is in trouble. So what we are now trying to do as specialized professionals is actually speak to our colleagues, and that's GPs, physios, and people who oftentimes are attending to a person's physical health. You know, people who are presenting with severe backache, chronic backache, neck problems. And to that extent, we're trying to have the conversation with our colleagues to say that might be a sign and symptom of some sort of mental health or psychological distress. Oftentimes severe anxiety because then you carry the tension in your body, or a depression because you carry the distress in your body as well. And trying to collaborate with them that yes, of course you can treat the symptom, though perhaps we can also look at the cause, which might be something which is psychological.
Yes, exactly. And then we also know that exercise has many benefits on the body. It has a neurobiological benefit where endorphins are released. It has a behavioral and emotional benefit of getting out of your space, getting out in the open air. So exercise has a lot of benefits for mental health. And I think sometimes it seems so heavy to climb this mountain, like I have to do a 30-minute run and I just don't have the energy to think small. You can just go for a 10-minute walk and then build yourself up from there, because it definitely does have a positive effect on mental health.
Fit body, fit mind.
100%.
Fit mind?
Fit body.
Well, my mind is fit, my body not so much anymore. So just like with the lack of physical fitness and ailments, people may be unwilling to talk about mental health challenges because they don't want to be judged. We get judged so much already. I mean, can we be real here? What would your advice be to someone with a mental health problem who finds it difficult to talk about it, especially in a country where we really are stigma heavy?
I think there's many resources to use that can be anonymous if you're not ready to go face to face and seek a therapist. So there's organizations where you can call in, like SADC, for example. You can call and be anonymous and have a telephonic consultation, and that can be the stepping stone to getting to sit face to face with a professional. So in the beginning, if you're not entirely sure, you can go onto the internet, look at resources, go to organizations where you don't have to present face to face, where you can be anonymous. So there are avenues to use if you're not ready.
There's a quote that says consistency is harder when no one is clapping for you. So what is the importance then of a support structure, having somebody that can help keep you accountable? I've got my sister, my niece, my trainer on the physical fitness side, my sister like across the board. It's important to know that somebody is also counting on you to carry through with your commitment start to finish, right?
I'm going to hand over to you though. I think it's also important to know when you need it, actually, and to recruit it when you need it. And to be quite clear in the messaging of, at this point, I really need you to be there for me. To be quite explicit about it and non-ambiguous, so people can in fact be there, and maybe also to say to them how you need them to be there.
Yeah, so you're talking about social support. And as psychologists and therapists, we know social support is a very, very big cornerstone to getting better when you're not well mentally. So you're lucky enough to have people in your corner. And I think there are individuals who are privileged enough to have that. But if you don't have it, you need to actively seek it. Because when you are depressed and anxious, your motivation levels and your initiative levels are very low. So to have someone to keep you motivated and to just be there for you initially does help in the beginning.
I think professionalizing your support is actually related to a previous question around stigma. And there's absolutely nothing wrong in professionalizing one's support. We may find it more acceptable to have au pairs or help domestically or in landscaping. We really may find that a lot more acceptable than having counselors, psychotherapists or psychiatrists. And professionalizing your support, if you need it, is what you must do.
Let's touch on poorer areas where people may just not have the financial means to join a gym. Even something as simple as running is not possible because the area could be dangerous, or whatever it is. So where then would people living under those conditions and circumstances start looking for help?
Can I start? I mean, because earlier you mentioned SADC, the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, and how it has national telephone lines where anybody at any point, 24/7, 365, can call in. Though we also actually have a WhatsApp service because of a recognition that more people, in fact, in Africa have cell phones than mattresses and televisions. So there are really institutions and organizations like that that try to reach rural areas. We are trying, and I suppose we really need to, as a country, increase our technology-assisted support, where people can either find information so that they can self-help or connect with other people that are struggling. And support groups is also a good place to go in those rural and peri-urban areas.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of government institutions like government hospitals that have a very, very good network of psychologists, occupational therapists, psychiatrists that can be utilized. So if you can't afford to go to a private therapist or can't afford other avenues of therapy, you can go to your local government hospital, local clinic, whether it's a primary, secondary or tertiary level, and get the help that you need there.
In fact, I was just thinking, and this might sound strange to say as a clinical psychologist, which is that mental health is not exclusive only to healthcare professionals like us. And that, in fact, we do recognize that in a country where there's one clinical psychologist to 100,000 people, that's not going to be sustainable. And so we do encourage people, even in those areas, to work with what they have as well. So in addition to the colleagues that you've mentioned, our allied colleagues, there's also social workers, but there's also nursing staff. And then there are people outside of clinics, like really healthy and helpful educators, or even people who might look at their religious communities for help and support. I think it's a message that we are really pushing out there, that say, considering the limitation of this specialized resource, actually work with what you have, and if those helpful and healthy spaces is what you have, then use that.
Can we touch back on the state hospital system again? I think a lot of people would think private healthcare is superior to state hospital healthcare. But they are very highly skilled and trained individuals at the state hospitals.
100%. I don't think the private sector is superior to the government sector at all. I think, and as a fact, all of us, all clinical psychologists and healthcare professionals have come through the government system. All the best supervisors, mentors, trainers are in that system still. So it is a very valuable resource to tap into if you don't have the ability for other resources. And even if you do, a lot of people use the government system. So it's 100% what you said, valuable resource.
Just a reminder also that in South Africa, our public healthcare system is aligned to academic institutions. So not only is it about professional service delivery, though it is held to a standard for academic criteria as well, which are oftentimes, if not almost always, on a global level.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mbele, Dr. Behari, for your time and your much-needed expert advice on the Standard Bank Finance Bit SA discussion on such an important matter affecting all of us in one way or another. In Mental Health Awareness Month, all fitness matters. Physical, emotional and mental capacity are key to living well. And thank you also for your time. Please do whatever is within your reach to take care of yourself. I'm Ursula Chikane.